Okay, so we're going to go through the process of importing some media and then organizing it. So there's several ways of importing. You can go to File, Import, and File, or multiple files if you want to keep on importing from different sources. You can double click in the project panel area in a blank area to import. You can press Command or Control I to import, or you can right click in the project panel and import from there. So that's 4 different ways. So I'm just going to use the double click method. So I'm going to double click in this blank area of my project panel, and I'm going to go to Activity 311 files. So you can see here I've got several different files. So I'm going to bring them in one at a time so that I can show you how best to do this. So I've got an Illustrator file called City Reel, and I'm going to bring it in with its layers. If you're going to be animating different parts of an Illustrator file, you have to save it in Illustrator with its layers intact. Remember, each layer in Illustrator becomes an asset in After Effects. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to change footage to composition retain layer sizes. That's a really important setting, because if you don't choose retain layer sizes, then each layer becomes the full size of your composition, and so it becomes quite unwieldy to animate. So composition retain layer sizes. I do not want to create a composition at this stage. Well, maybe I do. Okay, so I'm going to put that on. So what it will actually do is create a composition out of that Illustrator file. So I'm going to press open, and when it imports, you can see in the project panel it brings in a composition called City Reel, which matches the name of the Illustrator file, and then a folder containing all the different layers from that Illustrator file. So if I double click on the composition, you can see that all the layers are already stacked in my composition panel, and everything is good to go in terms of animating, which is actually pretty useful. So that's the first Illustrator file. I'm going to double click again. I've got a second Illustrator file called Clapperboard. I'm going to repeat that process: composition retain layer sizes, create composition. And so now I have this Clapperboard icon, and you'll see that it's split into 2 layers. The top layer is the top part, and then the rest is the board. Okay, again, double click, and now I have this giraffe, which I'm also going to do the same thing with. And it now is asking me, let me just go back and do that again. I just wasn't paying attention. So giraffe, and I want to bring it in as composition, retain layer sizes, create composition. Okay, so now if I double click, I now have this giraffe object, which actually is in just 1 layer. So I can't really do much with that. So there's no point in me having it in its own composition. So what I'm actually going to do is drag that out of that group or that folder and delete that folder and delete the giraffe composition. I don't need it because it's just 1 layer. So if I double click on that, you can see it's just basically an illustration. So then I have, double click again, a Photoshop document, and you treat Photoshop documents exactly the same as Illustrator documents. You can bring it in as footage or as composition. So I'm going to choose composition, retain layer sizes, create composition, and open. It says, what do you want to do with layer styles? Now I happen to know that there's no layer styles in this illustration, but I'm just going to say merge layer styles into footage anyway, just so that I don't have any problems with interpretation of layer styles. So you'll see it does the same as Illustrator. It creates a composition, and then it creates a folder containing all the layers from Photoshop as separate assets. So if I double click there, you will see now I have all of those giraffe parts, all the parts of the animal ready to animate. So if I hide them, you'll see there's all the different parts there ready to animate. So you can see how important it is that you understand how to work with Photoshop, Illustrator, and After Effects, those three applications really work well together to create all of your assets. So let's double click again, and now I have an image sequence. So an image sequence is basically a numbered sequence of images making up an animation. And the reason why we use image sequences is because it retains the quality of the animation that we're importing, whereas if we actually had to render out a movie file and bring it in, movie files often are compressed and therefore the quality is not quite as sharp as an image sequence. The disadvantage of image sequences is that they do tend to take up a lot of disk space. So here we've got a PNG image sequence. So I'm just going to click on the first one, and After Effects immediately picks up that these are numbered files, and it says, do you want to bring it in as a PNG sequence? Now if I unchecked that and I imported, it would just bring in that one PNG that's selected. If I check that, it will read all, how many are there here? All 415 images, and it will put those into a movie clip. I want to also create a composition from that and then say open. So now you can see there's this composition that contains that entire sequence as a movie clip. Okay, and there's the movie clip itself here. So if I just scroll along here, you can see that's what it is. Okay, so I've got quite a lot of different assets here. I need to manage them. It's a bit of a mess at the moment. But what I also want to do is I want to put in a placeholder, because sometimes you are expecting something. So maybe I'm expecting some footage from a film crew that haven't quite finished yet. Maybe the designer, the graphic designer, hasn't finished with the title yet. So I can just put in a placeholder that I can use until that footage or that media is available. So I'm just going to go File, Import, Placeholder. Okay, and I'm just going to call this title. So I don't know whether I'm going to make the title in Photoshop or Illustrator or even After Effects. I'm just putting in a placeholder at the moment to help me include that in my compositions. I'm going to set the frame rate here to 25 frames per second, and I'll set the duration to 10 seconds. 10 seconds. I'll leave the size as Full HD 1920 by 1080 and say OK. So you'll see a placeholder is basically just a blank offline asset. If I finally get my title done and I want to put it in here, all I do is double click on that placeholder and I go and choose that file, and it will replace it here and wherever I've used it in any comps. Okay, so now let's be organized with our project panel. So the first thing is this image sequence. Because an image sequence is not a movie, After Effects does not know what frame rate it should be played at. So what it does is it gives it automatically the frame rate of the project. So I might not want that. So I'm going to take this image sequence and I'm going to right click and go to Interpret Footage, Main. And this is quite a big dialog box, but the things that really are useful is to change your frame rate. So assume this frame rate, I'm going to say 25. It also allows you to loop a sequence over and over again if you want it to just play for a certain number of times. I'm happy that this just plays once. And then there's some alpha options. So if there's any transparency in the image sequence, which there is, you want to decide, do you want to ignore that transparency? Do you want to bring it in straight unmatted? Or do you want to pre-multiply it? So straight unmatted is usually the option that's going to work best for you. Pre-multiplied means if you're having problems with the transparency around the edges, maybe having a little bit of a halo or something like that, pre-multiplied might help that. Guess is pretty much exactly what it says it is. It's a guess, and it's often a bad guess, so I never use this. If it was accurate, it would say auto and not guess. So guess just means let After Effects make the decision, but it's probably not going to get it right. So straight pre-multiplied 99% of the time. Okay, everything else is fine here. Okay. Now the name of this image sequence is not very useful. That really doesn't mean anything. So what you don't want to do is double click to rename. That's not going to rename it. That's just going to open it in the footage preview window. So to rename something, you select it and you press enter. And we're just going to call this film strip clip. Okay, let's see if anything else needs renaming. So city reel is self-explanatory, city reel layers is fine, clapperboard layers is fine, composition, what is this? Oh, that's the film strip. So I'm going to call this, press enter, film strip comp. Okay, the giraffe is self-explanatory, giraffe layers, and then the Illustrator file is just giraffe. So I'm just going to press enter and I'm just going to leave it as that. So the renaming stuff here doesn't rename the original assets, it's just renaming it here. And for this placeholder called title, that's fine. So now I'm going to organize things into folders. So I'm going to make a folder and I'm going to call it illustrations, and that's going to be my giraffe, my giraffe layers, can go in there, my clapperboard layers, and my city reel layers. Okay. Then I want a folder. So I'm clicking away because if I've got something selected and I make a new folder, it becomes a subfolder, which is not what I want. So I'm going to close this up, click away, and then make a new folder, and I'm going to call this comps for compositions. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4 compositions. Okay. Then I'll make another folder and I'll call it let's call it movie clips, and I'll put this film strip clip into there, and then one more, placeholders, and I'll put this title in there. Okay, so that's a much more organized project panel with everything nicely arranged into its different folders. So if you want to find stuff, so if I take, let's just take this city reel here, and you'll see all of these layers are already arranged here because I chose create comp when I imported it. If I want to find out, if I'm looking at a project in my, at a composition inside my project, and I decide, you know what, I don't actually know where this layer is. If I right click on that layer and I go to reveal, I can say either reveal in Finder, and on Windows it will be reveal in Windows Explorer. It will actually show me where on my hard drive that particular asset is. And if I say reveal layer source in project, if I choose that, it goes and highlights that particular asset that's being used. And that's quite important because you can rename your assets here in the project, in the composition panel. So if I just hit enter and I just call this something, it's not matching the original asset in my project panel. However, if I right click on it and say reveal layer source, it actually highlights and says, okay, even though this is named differently, this is where it's actually coming from. So it's really useful to be able to do that. Let me just undo that. And the same with your assets in the project panel. If I right click on an asset in the project panel, I can go to reveal in Finder, which is going to show me where it is on my hard drive. I can also go to reveal in composition, and it tells me which composition and which layer it is. So it shows me the connection there. So it allows you to be super organized with all of your assets and where they're used in different compositions. Okay, so you're going to follow these steps to set up this project. and we're going to continue to work with this project through a number of activities, so keep it handy. You're going to go to File, Save As, and just put it somewhere like on your desktop, and let's just call it at this stage Activity 3.1.1 completed. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and see you next time.